Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is a sunny Sunday at the end of October, and I have got a little tray of seedlings here. I sowed them at a demo I did some weeks ago, and they've all been germinating away and pubbling along. And they're sort of sitting there. And what happens often with people when they're sowing seeds in the autumn for hardy annuals is they have to decide at some point whether they're going to keep them, pot them on and keep them in the greenhouse all winter, and these are at exactly the right size to do that now, or I'm going to plant mine outside. And the reason I'm going to plant them outside at the end of October is I have a patch of ground which is clear, but it's also very protected. It's right next door to the house, and we have a stone walled house facing west, so it'll absorb the warmth during the day and keep the warmth during the evening. It's crossed off also by a fence, so it's basically an L-shaped space which is very protected. So I'm thinking I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to plant these that are all hardy annuals out in that space, and I'm not really going to be cropping from it. It's not practical for a cropping space, but it will be pretty in the spring and give us all pleasure, which is attractive. So what have we got? We've got some Ami majors here, tiny Ami majors, Sorrency major purpurescens, honeywort, some California poppies, some Nigella, Scabiosa ping pong, and the lovely, this is a weed, but this is very hardy here, if it's, so long as it's well protected, the annual Gypsophila Covent Garden. And these seeds were all from Higgledy Garden, and all of these seedlings, I could pot them on and keep them in the greenhouse over the winter, somewhere, a cool greenhouse, they'd be fine, and plant them out in the spring. But because I've got this very protected space, I'm going to plant them out. It is really important when you're gardening that you consider your particular space. You can look at your zoning, and it will tell you how cold you might get in the winter. You can think about when your first and last frost date are supposed to be. But in real life, it is rarely the case that just because an area is supposed to behave in one way or another, it will or not. It is really important when you're gardening that you stand out in your yard and you sniff the wind. And your instincts will be very strong as to whether you should plant out or keep in, or what you should do to keep your garden going. We have been growing plants on purpose for 10,000 years or more as a species. So our instincts are very strong when it comes to planting. And I'll tell you what my instinct is first. It's to go weed over the patch that I plan to plant into. Come on, I'll show it to you. So this is the patch. It's just a little square. I mulched it a few weeks ago, so the mulch has all settled in nicely. We've had a bit of rain, so it's nice and receptive. But I'm just going to whip over it and weed it. There's a bit of couch grass, just not very much, but the odd bit. Just tidy it up, and then I'm going to put my seedlings in. A really top tip, it's so windy, a really top tip is to mulch. If you're going to mulch your beds, mulch them and then leave them for a few days before you plant into them. Because my pigeons come along and dig over the mulch. If I mulch and plant straight into the mulch, the pigeons come and dig over and pull all the plants out. But if I mulch and then the pigeons come and dig it over and have a look, and then days or weeks later plant into it, the pigeons have lost interest by then. And it's a good way to avoid having your little seedlings dug up. Dug up by birds. With the weeding, just have a look for a bit of root and pull. It doesn't matter if you get all the root out. If you're just rough weeding, then what you're doing is you're preventing the plant from photosynthesizing. And so even if you don't get any root out, it doesn't matter, you're helping it by taking out the green top of the plant to stop the photosynthesizing. The little green grass I've got all the way through this is couch grass. It's nothing like what it used to be. And if you're weeding over a patch where there's been other things over the years, watch out for seedlings. This is a bronze fennel seedling, which I recognise because after many years I learned to recognise all my seedlings. And this is a valuable friend, so I'm going to be careful not to weed that out. Right, I've given it a rough weed over, and now I'm ready to add my seedlings. Here are more exciting seedlings. I found lots of things which have self-sown. For example, more Sorrency. So I've got Sorrency seedlings to add, and I've grown Serenity here before, so it's sown itself and is happy here, so I know it's a good place for it. Now, here in my hand is a Serenity seedling, and you can see it's a dinky little thing, but here in the flower bed are about 10 Serenity plants, and this is the space they're taking up. So it's worth really thinking about where you're going to put your seedlings and how close together you're going to put them. If I go right in here, you can see how these have self-sown, and they're actually quite far apart from each other. They're about 7 or 8 inches apart. So that's what I'm going to make sure I do. I'm going to make sure I leave room for the plants where I plant them out. Right, this is not going to be a cut flower patch, so I needn't worry too much about putting everything in rows so that it's quick for harvesting. It's just going to look pretty in the spring. But I am going to slightly think about height, and I'll put anything that I think is going to be tall at the back. So, for example, this Scabiosa ping pong is probably the tallest, followed by the Serenity. The Ami Majus actually is really the tallest, so I'm going to put them towards the back. So it's going to go Ami, Scabiosa ping pong, Sorrency, and then I'm going to put the this is called Gypsophila Covent Garden next, and closest to the front because it loves it. It loves it hot, but also I'm hoping it'll seed itself into the concrete. I'm going to put these little Nigella and the Californian poppies along the front. I'm not going to be too rowish about it, but I am going to slightly think about height as I go. And I'm going to give each one plenty of room, because if I'm growing cut flowers for cutting, I'm very conscious of space, but this is just a nice little mix to fill up a nice little space. So I'm not going to be too fussy about it. And I'll just show you one, well, you're going to get blown off. I'm going to show you one Serenity as it goes in, and then I'm going to plant them all. So here's my little Serenity, and I have scooped it, you can see, out of the tray. It's got its earth, and so I'm not disturbing the roots too much. And because it's quite dinky, with my bare hand, I should be wearing gloves. You should wear gloves for gardening, because because if you scratch your hand with glass or something in the soil, you'll be in real trouble. You might get tetanus. So wear gloves when you garden. Up here, I've already got some little people. These are going to be hollyhocks. And here we have Granny's bonnets, Aquilegia. And here, I'm going to pop in one of these Serenity. So I'm going to scrape a little hole. This lovely thick mulch. I've mulched to several inches. So I can literally pop it in the soil, bring a little bit of compost around it, and just, it's worth tamping it in nicely so that it's not going to get blown away with this great wind we're going to have this afternoon. I'll show you up close and personal. There it is, and you can see where I've just scraped the earth back, popped in the seedling and popped the earth back round it. Now the weather has been really wet and we are forecast a great deal of rain this afternoon, so I'm going to take my life in my hands. I'm not going to water these in, but normally I would say water in whatever happens. Right, there you are. They're little tiny people, but they'll be all right in there. It's very, very protected. You can see there's a sort of corner which is going to keep it really warm. So even though we will get, and these shrubs here will keep it warm as well, and the concrete ground, any warmth will bounce off it onto the bed. This is a very protected little bed. As they get bigger, if they get a bit leggy, I'll pinch them out for the spring. But at the moment they're not big enough to pinch out. I suspect what they'll all do is just sit there, hunker down, get their roots down, and in the spring I hope we'll have a little cut flower patch. Now, of course, if it doesn't rain this afternoon, it is forecast to be apocalyptic rain this afternoon. So I'm not watering them in. But if it doesn't for any reason, I will come back and I will water those plants in. Because the water, what it does, it doesn't just give them something to drink. It's like wet glue. It settles the plant into the ground. So it's really important to water plants in unless you are forecast apocalyptic amounts of rain. And if I left them in the greenhouse over the winter, it's a bit warmer in the greenhouse, so they would get a bit bigger. And I would possibly end up pinching out more to keep them smaller, planting out in March or April. And they would have really good root systems. This is so protected, it's like a cold frame here. So they won't get big, they will get their roots down. And so long as we have enough rain through the winter and they don't get frozen to death, then they will make a lovely spring. I know. A lovely spring show. I have left a bit of space to the side here because I need to be able to get to those roses at the back, and I will need some of that ivy for my winter arrangements. So I've left myself space to get up and down the side without treading on them. And we'll see how that looks in the spring. Anyway, thanks very much for coming along. Do follow the channel, subscribe, press the bell icon, and we'll tell you when we've got more clips coming up. And if any of the tips and tricks I give you along the way are helpful, then you can always buy me a coffee. The link to coffee buying is in the blurb to all my clips. Thanks very much for coming along on this windy day, and I will see you soon. Right, I've now got to go cutting.